This is the Pregame Engineer Tailgate Mayor Racing Podcast, episode number 30. Hit another milestone there. It's Saturday, January 2nd, 2016. Happy New Year, Sherwin.
Happy New Year to you. Whoop. I'm off mic. Now I'm back.
That's right. I am Tailgate Mayor Rusty Wallace, and here with Pregame Engineer Andrew Sherwin at the new and improved PETM Podcast Studio. What do you think, man?
We all but have ourselves a professional amateur setup here with the microphone booms that the Periscope folks can see. It's pretty neat, actually. It's kind of fun.
We got the desks that are facing each other. We got me and my wife got rid of all the crap that was in this room. Big old futon that was sitting there, some table thing over here, blah, blah, blah. Turn it into this hobby room. Of course, my half of the hobby room is the PETM podcast, so I've got all the wires and set up here, and everybody on Periscope can see us, so shout out to our Periscope folks. But, yeah, and got the mic boom for Christmas, and as soon as I showed it to Sherwin, he's like, I'm going on Amazon doing that click, 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 and buying that thing.
Yeah, and it showed up 2 days later like it's apt to do when it's got that little light blue prime indicator next to it.
Yeah, nice little plug.
I'm seeing a nice, pleasant addition to this room other than the furniture, which is perfect. I see a really nice-looking panoramic Casey Kane framed photo there from back in 06 when he won 6 races.
Yeah, talking about shout-outs here. So my sister got me for Christmas that little panorama there with Casey Kane. He's got the number 9 Dodge back with the Evernham with the feathered E there on the 9.
That's right.
He's and there's a actual race-used tire piece.
Oh, a hunk of tire.
Yeah, there's a hunk of tire that's in there that's pretty cool. So they did a good job putting that together, and another shout out to my sister there. The other thing, my diploma from Georgia Tech hanging next to it.
Right next to it.
That
says
one was funny.
that you were not what we were called during the pre-show.
We had some particular comments.
Turns out we have a computer science graduate from the Georgia Institute of Technology.
In-house.
And it's not in any way scholastically inhibited.
Right. So, funny story, I was the first person to graduate from college in my family, and my sister followed soon after, but my dad came a few days ago. He was here, and he took a picture of my diploma and said, I'm going to crop out the part that says junior at the end because I'm a junior. He said, and then I'm going to go tell everybody I graduated. So, there you go.
Rusty's dad's got a very interesting sense of humor.
For sure. Well, man, what you drinking today?
What are you drinking?
What am I drinking?
Because I think we're drinking the same thing.
I think we are. We got that old Jim Beam White, and that's the Red Rock. Red Rock?
Yeah, Red Rock.
Oh, wow, I got it right this time. The Red Rock Ginger Ale. Sherwin brought it over. On deck, man. We're going old school.
Yeah, we got some Donald Sherwin ginger ale influence here. It's a spicy, sweet ginger ale made by Red Rock. It's quite tasty. And then on deck, the ever classic white Miller Lite, delicious, fine light Pilsner in a can.
Right, so the throwback can that, if I remember right, that was supposed to be discontinued in like February of 2013 or so.
It's supposed to have been a surprise for the Daytona 500. They sold so many beers that in March they decided in April that they were just going full on throwback, and they haven't looked back for 2 years.
No doubt. I can't imagine, I would imagine that they've sold 3 times as many or so. I mean, they've probably gone crazy, and their marketing guy got a huge promotion and stock options and who knows what. But good on him.
Yeah, good on him.
Well, we got a few shout-outs today. I know we've said shout-out a couple times, but here, we're gonna do the shout-out thing, and this time I'm going to remember to move that up. Here it comes. I got a bunch of shout-outs, man. First off, I think it was 1 or 2 episodes ago that we shouted out to our 100th follower on Twitter, and as of today, as of right before the podcast time, we're up to 240 followers in not a whole lot of time. So I'm tickled beyond expectation here.
Yeah, and I'm trying to look at our notifications. We went flying past 200 so fast. I don't know who it was. I can look back here and see a cluster of followers because we had like 30 come in one day, which is super awesome. But yeah, it's been a fun ride. We're kind of where we feel like we're on the up glide there in terms of at least the podcast handle's getting some attention. I guess we can segue right into the Drunken Brian France interaction.
Yep, plenty of shout outs to be had. So one of them, Drunken Brian France, which is a funny Twitter handle to start with.
Right, it's at Drunk Brian F. He is a new subscriber of the podcast, official. He's probably gonna get it on his iPhone in about an hour and a half from now when we're done and we get it uploaded. So he'll get to listen to it then. But he kind of gave us props for saluting our 100th follower and Kenny, the Marine Corps vet who's doing the race for Veterans Fighting PST.
Yeah, at Kenny,
so
or at
awesome.
USMC Kenny SGT. I know that's a lot, but yeah, Kenny Smith raising money for that USMC Vet Racing Fund.
Yeah, and to show our support, the podcast donated, and I also tweeted out a link to the GoFundMe account so that if you feel so motivated, you could go give him $1 or $2. Rest assured, his cause, there is no better cause.
No doubt. Going back to Drunken Brian France, though, one of the I would say pinnacles of the PETM podcast history, I think, is not just getting Drunken Brian France as a follower, but also I would say our categorization among his following.
Oh yeah, he sure propped our egos up quite a bit. By adding us to his personal list of independent media. And we are super appreciative of that because while we are certainly humble enough to understand our amateur and sometimes garbage content doesn't warrant a lot of praise, but we appreciate the indicator that we are a media source, and that's pretty cool.
And that maybe we're providing something that's worth listening to every once in a while.
Well, I think the new droppin knowledge section is.
Hey, and we're going to continue today for
pretty
sure.
Good.
And you know what? Little preview for you. I did zero research for this week's droppin knowledge.
Also,
I'm just going,
means that you're coming off the cuff for me, so I'm just going to have to go with what I know that already.
I think it's stuff we already know. I did do some thinking about how to get into it, but we're going to be talking about things that we know as engineers: pressure, temperature, etc. And the relationships between all those and what all that means as you're going through a race. We'll get to it in a minute. A couple more shout-outs real quick. iRacers Lounge. So our old friends at iRacers Lounge, we've shouted them out before. They just posted up a new podcast. They're doing them every week. Not every week, once a month it looks like. And they just posted one like 30 seconds before we started this podcast. So go out and check them out too. iRacers Lounge. They do that iRacers game.
Yeah, that's their podcast handle, and then the one that we've communicated with directly is Mike Ellis.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know. I think his podcast his Twitter handle is just at Mike Dean DAN Ellis.
Yeah. And then a couple more shout-outs to our Periscope followers. So, of course, we do the Periscope every time. We've got one Periscope pointing right at us on the 90-degree angle, one at sort of a 45 angle.
At my worst angle, which is the profile, but
right.
That's okay. I'll live with it.
Same here. But we had some folks coming on earlier in the pre-show. They were from Germany and from Switzerland. And they were Sweden. I said Switzerland just because I thought that's where it was. I didn't get them mixed up. I do know where they are. But they were asking us about McDonald's, which was kind of funny. So
yeah, we got a question about McDonald's, and there was some discussion of Dr. Pepper, which may or not allude to conversation about college football later. The funny commercials that Dr. Pepper has been running the last couple of years for the playoffs with crazy dude trying to get his petition signed.
Right. So we're coming off of Christmas, and I tell you what, man, between what you have gotten for Christmas, what I've gotten for Christmas, you can tell that our Twitter handles are Tailgate Mayor and Pregame ENG. Pregame
That's
Engineer.
right. It's totally related to cooking, and even more so than that, just kind of the
cooking, podcasting, everything that we're into is totally what our family has now deemed what they're going to be getting us for Christmas.
Right. So I'll just run down the the main things that I got was a new chopping knife. I got a knife sharpener, and I got Esquire's The Only Cookbook a Man will Ever Need, or whatever it's called.
That's fantastic.
I should have brought it with me just so I could remember the title of it, but it's got some good looking recipes in it.
What sort of stuff? Is it like steak and...
They do all of it. They do
Okay.
Breakfast, brunch, lunch, dinner, dessert, and like cocktail hour.
Oh, that's
like
cool.
and then like, yeah, and it's mostly red meat and pork and,
That sounds
eggs and
awesome.
bacon and ham.
Oh, that sounds awesome. For any of you of the new folks of the 240 followers that we have on Twitter, it is the off season right now, so there ain't a whole lot to talk about NASCAR wise. We'll be dropping knowledge here in a little bit, but until then, we're just going to be having a little fun, of course. So if you're turned off by all this, sorry, but we'll get back to you
we're
soon.
about 10 minutes in and really hadn't said anything about NASCAR other than the fact that I'm going to be reading this book as I fly to and fro Mexico City, because that's what dumb engineers do.
Did we talk about the book yet?
I thought maybe we just did on the Periscope. Podcast.
I don't think we did
Here's
on
the plug, the shout out to Neil Thompson, former resident of New Jersey, had a gearhead for a father. Decided he wanted to write a book. When he found out about moonshine and NASCAR and the connection between the two, he decided to do an in-region documentary type nonfiction book, very much like Friday Night Lights, and I'm about to read the hell out of it.
That sounds great. And you're going to Mexico City for work in a couple weeks. Or not a couple weeks, a couple days.
Couple days.
2 days.
I got 7 hours of flying. We'll see how far I get into it. I do read at about an 11th grade level, so it might take me a while to get through it.
I hear you there. Well, I will try to be humble about it, but man, the parents hit the nail on the head for me, and bought me the old big green egg for Christmas, and so me and Sherwin have been cooking on it this afternoon and evening. We've done a fantastic pork roast, and we did some chicken wings that we're taking to the Falcons game tomorrow, doing the pregame there. It's going to be very awesome. Hadn't been to a Falcons game yet this year.
Me neither. And I think it was kind of like, okay, well, we got one last shot to get her done. Let's go. They've been riding a little bit of a wave, so maybe we'll have some positive results on the field, but we are guaranteed to have positive results during the tailgate, both in food and drink.
Right. And so on top of that, I've got the mic stand here, and really the PETM studio that if you're on Periscope, you can see us here. You talked about the Casey Kane mural behind me here. Man, I posted on Facebook or Twitter or something. I said, somebody, somehow Santa didn't get the word and thought that I was a good boy this year, because it's been pretty wild. So really humbled and amazed by what people are thinking about and trying to get me stuff and all that. I don't know what to say, but I can say this: it's all going to get used real heavy. So excited about what we're getting into the next few months.
For sure. I mean, if we just talk about the evolution of the podcast, I think 2 or 3 episodes in, you had already made the decision to purchase a microphone.
Right.
And when I listened to it, I understood how much better the quality was, so I immediately bought one myself.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first evolution, and that was probably a month or a month and a half in. And then when I saw that you got this boom, I was like, well, I certainly got to do that. And I found an what a deal on Amazon that, if it only lasts a couple of months, I'll still get my money's worth out of it. I suspect it'll last a little longer than that because it looks like it has the exact same frame as yours.
Yeah. Yep. I think it's the same frame.
Yeah.
You've got a little fancier tip on it, which now I'm going to go by. Like, we're kind of self-perpetuating here.
Yeah. So it's definitely a keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing, but not from a perspective of breaking the bank. It's just like, oh, that's so cool. Like, you got both hands. You don't have to lean in. Like, the mic's right in front of your face. I mean, it's
right.
awesome.
Right.
It really does change the game. And one of the things we really discovered is while we can make maybe 20 or 30 minutes of really good audio doing VoIP or what did I said that wrong? Didn't
you
I?
got it. VoIP.
VoIP, yeah. But for some reason or another, a connection about 40 to 50 minutes in starts to get really crappy. But the content that we produce in person together has a really good audio quality, or at least typically it does.
Let's drop knowledge.
Drop in knowledge with the mayor.
You ready to do this?
Yeah, man. I'm ready you to spring something on me.
Well, it ain't going to be nothing that you don't know. Today we're talking about tires.
Tires.
Tars. And that's a one-syllable word where I come from. Tires.
That's right. I can go in all day and explain to you all about the weird interactions I had when I lived in Michigan, and I said tar or I said bowl.
Yeah, bowl and small.
Bowl or changing the oil. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Changing the oil.
Changing the oil.
What? Man, we just say it different. It's all good.
You're doing oil changes, and they're throwing eggs off the roof.
Yeah, and they're getting in cars.
So, and apologies to everyone in the Midwest for that.
Fun.
That was terrible.
The difference between the cultures is what makes it what makes life more entertaining.
So, in the Droppin' Knowledge segment over the last few weeks, we've been talking about really the things that the crew chief can change during the race, and things that not just crew chief, but with the track bar that the driver can change now.
Keeping the theme.
Oh,
and John Gruden would say tires.
Tires. John Gruden would say tires.
Yeah. Anyway.
We're having fun.
We're having fun. This is the off season, y'all.
Right. So we talked about wedge and how to add some wedge, lose some wedge.
We talked about
mechanical how it's kind of like how it's kind of like the tabletop thing or table bottom thing, and sticking the wedge underneath and all that. I really enjoyed that one. Track bar. We talked about
track bar, which is some mechanical and some aero.
Right.
I think with the new car, the Gen 6, it's probably more aero than it is anything else.
I think you're right. I did a lot of thinking about the track bar before that episode and after that episode because it's so hard to find information on it. So
it's a more mysterious science than wedge.
Right. Maybe that's something we need to talk about with the first driver that we bring onto this thing and say, tell us about track bar and when you're changing it and stuff. So let's do that.
For sure.
So last thing we're going to talk about, last thing, I don't know why I say last thing, but the next thing we're going to talk about.
The next thing we're going to talk about
is tires.
Tires.
Going to talk about tires. And what's interesting about this one, I said it earlier, I didn't do any research on this one.
Chances are super good I'm going to throw something at you that you're not prepared for.
That's okay.
It's just rattling around an old duder's head.
Well, that'll happen. He'll do that. I think when we talk about tires, we got to talk about a little bit of physics here and start up with that. And what I mean by physics and stuff, if you have an enclosed space like a tire, right, and you increase the temperature, what's that do to the pressure?
Well, what does increasing temperature do to any matter on Earth?
Right, increases the pressure.
Increases the volume of it.
The volume, yeah.
Right, so if you have an enclosed volume or a mostly enclosed volume,
right,
then what you're going to do is increase the pressure within that volume subset.
Right, so I think the rest of what we're going to talk about right here with tire pressure and Droppin' Knowledge segment revolves around that exactly. Lower temperature is lower pressure. Higher temperature is higher pressure. Okay, and we're talking about it can be by a pound or two when we're talking about one of the tires in a NASCAR tire.
Yeah, and this is one of the few things that's probably a linear relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I think wedge adjustments have a linear moment within them, but they're on each end there are exponential relationships.
Yep.
I think the temperature and pressure regions that we operate with in NASCAR tires is pretty linear.
Yeah. And so something to think about when you're driving around the track, when that tire is eating up track and it's losing its rubber and stuff, and there's a lot of friction there. With the friction, after a few laps, what do you get? You get a lot of heat, right?
You get a much more inflated tire.
So now you get a lot more pressure, and the tire inflates a lot. So that, again, this is all related to how we're going to talk about tires today, which is higher pressure, higher heat, higher pressure, lower heat, lower pressure, and how to mess with that. What you hear about, and so what if you didn't know, if you hear about people talking about their cars really coming to them at the end of a run, then it could be, there's several reasons, but one of the reasons could be that once their tires heat up, that they just got off from the pit stop, once those tires heat up, get a little more pressure in them, the car starts running a little better, starts turning a little better. And so you'll hear that a lot. Well, he's good on the end of a run. You'll hear the opposite too. Well, he's madness on the beginning of a run. Somebody like Kyle Busch. I mean, you both. Kyle Busch will.
Ryan Newman.
Yeah. And they have it set up to where beginning of a run, they're just on fire. And then you start seeing them drop
Jamie
off
McMurray.
Jamie
Mac. Another one of those that gets shot out. Yeah, so there's so many different angles, and we don't want to revisit them because there's a lot of things now that you've thrown this at me I want to talk about because there's a whole lot of things that cause all that extra heat to build up in the car, or the tire rather. Some of it's just the natural running around the track at the speeds they do. Tend to build up heat. I mean, even in your own car, if you go drive your car around for an hour and then park it, your tires are hot, even if it's cold outside.
Right, and if you look at any sort of I actually did go on to the there's some government website that has to do with how to maintain your car, and they say never check your tire pressures when you've been driving around. You want to have not been driving around for at least, and they said something like 2 or 3 hours. Like, we don't want you to have driven
around. So the rating is set up for cold.
The rating's set up for cold. You want to check your own tire pressure.
Ambient.
Cold, ambient, whatever. Because, and they even said if you have to drive to go check your pressure, make sure it's within 1 to 2 miles. Like, it's that quick how quickly that heat and that pressure builds up in the tire.
Yep. That makes sense. So, in the one of the other combinations you have is that when you're at low pressure, there's actually more of the tire contacting the track.
Exactly.
So, like, for instance, at Martinsville,
that's the race to bring up.
I mean, we've seen this at a lot more tracks now than just Martinsville. Certainly at Phoenix too. But how when these guys will start a run, you actually see a ripple in the tire like we see in drag cars.
Mm-hmm.
Because the pressure is so low, the sidewall is actually buckling. And that's two different things. Now, I know eventually along this path of dropping knowledge, we're going to talk about shocks, and we're going to have a lot less to talk about, I think, about those. But one thing to remember is the tire also functions as a shock.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of the suspension of the car. Mm-hmm. Now, in today's NASCAR, the tire and its flexibility and how much pressure's in it also acts as part of the suspension.
Right. So I think we've done a good job with in the wedge discussion and the track bar discussion, talking about how it relates to your own car too. One thing to relate tires to your own car is, let's talk about that pressure. So in my truck, they recommend 35 pounds of pressure per tire. And my tires last around, they say 60,000 miles. Truth is, I'm getting probably 30 to 40 out of them. Now, in NASCAR, it's quite different.
Well, yeah, and that depends on what track we go to. But
mm-hmm.
At any, let's say a handful of the roughest tracks, your Texases, your Atlantas,
yep.
I'm drawing a blank. Kentucky for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You got caution 8 laps into a run, you're coming to get tires.
Right.
Like, regardless of where it is in the race.
Right.
Because new tires are so much better than old tires.
Right. And not only that, but the pressures that they're running compared to your stock vehicles. So, like I said, I run about 35 pounds of pressure in my tires. Their baseline, I like to think of as around 10. And then when they say go up a pound, down a pound, it's up or down from around 10.
Yeah, I think on the fast tracks, I think it's somewhere in the nice work.
Thank you.
High to middle teens on the left side of the car, and in the low 20s on the right side of the car. You go to a place like Martinsville, left side tires might be at 8 pounds,
mm-hmm.
and the right sides might be at 13.
Right, and so that's how the tire's set up. Now
that's a basketball amount of pressure,
right,
or a soccer ball amount of pressure,
right. Just barely bouncing. So once you get once you get moving, so let's talk about now that tire's on the track, right? And let's say it's at a low pressure. You already talked about this. When it's at the low pressure, what do? You get more grip, right?
Get more grip.
So that tire, more of that tire is mashing into the ground because the weight of the car is on it and it's at a lower pressure. If you think about it like a balloon, if you have a balloon that's real low pressure that you haven't put a whole lot of air in, and you put some weight on it, it mashes down into the ground.
More of it will touch the ground.
Right.
Absolutely.
Now, if you blow that balloon up to almost popping point and you put that same weight on it, I'm not talking about the weight of a car, I'm talking about just, like a half-pound weight on top of it, and you blow it up to where it's almost about to bust, well, there ain't going to be much
it's got a lot
balloon.
of resistance.
Right. A lot of resistance, ain't much of the balloon touching the track or whatever you have it sitting on. Now, what's interesting about that is because they're running around the track, because the tires are heating up, as they're going around, that balloon is getting blown up a bit more. And so we've already talked about that a bit, but as you're in the run, that tire is increasing pressure, that balloon is increasing pressure, and you start getting less contact. Now, less contact with the ground means less grip.
Means less grip, but it also means more wear on a concentrated area.
Mm-hmm.
So there could be a symbiotic temperature relationship, but the car's slowing down.
Right. So as you're going along in the run, when you're getting less grip, what does that mean too? That also means that you might be you might be looser as you're going as the run is going along. It's going to loosen up for you. Or tighten up for you. I'm sorry.
Well, it could do either one.
That's
the thing, is it could do either one.
Depending on which tires.
We already talked about the other two suspension components that could play a role in loose or tight. It could play a role either way. It could be that your right front is the one that you're overheating, and that will make you tight. If your left rear is the tire you're overheating, that will make you more loose.
Right, because those are increasing pressure.
Or right rear, excuse me.
Right rear, yep. Because those are increasing pressure, getting less grip. Right rear, less grip, it's going to slide out from under you. That's loose.
Right, because the more temperature, and like you said, like you put a more concentrated area is seeing the road, and more temperature means more rubber is willing to depart from the tire and join the track, because there's a relationship there, and the less rubber you have on the tread, the less grip you have.
Mm-hmm. And I like to think of it in extremes when you're trying to figure out, okay, did it mean loose or tight in this situation? Think of it like a pizza wheel. In other words, just a pizza tray that's an inch wide, and think of that as your high pressure versus a big old, you already said it, like a drag racing tire that's blown up to hardly even holding the car above the ground.
Right.
And that's the one where you get a lot of grip versus the little bit of grip that you get with the pizza wheels. If you're running pizza wheels on the front of your car, you can't turn that car, right?
That's right.
That's going to be tight.
It's going to push up into the hill, as they say.
Right. Now, if you're running pizza wheels on the back and you've got your drag wheels on the front, and remember, the power's going to the rear. You mash that gas and you try to turn, whew, that's just coming right off under you.
Goose.
That's right. So that's probably the best way to think about it. For me, that's really, as you're thinking about what the driver is saying. He's saying, I'm loose here, I'm tight here, or even depending on the corner too, because the angle that they're coming in at it and how hot it's getting in that angle, how much grip they have at that angle. That's among the things. If they're saying I'm loose, then the crew chief is thinking about all those things that he can adjust from wedge. We talked about how to fix a loose car, or how to remedy a loose car with wedge. Talked about how to remedy a loose car with the track bar, and you can also do that with the tire pressures.
Yeah, well, and it's crazy to see the evolution, because when you and I first started listening to the Race View scanner on NASCAR.com. You would hear crew chiefs make 1 pound and half-pound adjustments.
Yeah.
We're hearing teams now make 1/10 and a quarter-pound adjustments to air pressure, and that just lets you know how sensitive the whole situation is. The relationship is between how much temperature builds up in the tire, how much that impacts the grip, how much that impacts how well the car goes over bumps, for instance. Like we said, the suspension component of the tire, all those things. There are so many dynamics It's amazing. I wouldn't even know where to start with how a crew chief makes a decision about whether to make a tire pressure change or to make a wedge or maybe even a shock adjustment. We'll get to that in another episode. Or asking the driver to try something different with his track bar. I think it's a combination of looking at how well did the track take rubber, what is the temperature outside, what's your baseline from practice.
I was going to say practice.
Where's the
to
splitter
me would have
riding?
To be the biggest...
Like they take pictures, just like in NFL, where in the booth they take all these pictures. Actually, not in the booth; it's in the end zones. They take all these pictures of what's happening with the offense and defense, and the quarterback is just rifling through these things every time he comes off the field to see, oh, the safety was 3 inches this way, so I should have thrown back shoulder instead of inside. And it's like NASCAR crew chiefs are making the same kind of decisions, just the information is not as available to us as it is with football, but it'll get that way.
Right. And I think this is where teams have, when people talk about racing teams, your Hendrick, your Gibbs, Roush and all that stuff, and they're sharing when you hear them, or when you hear the media guys, they're talking about, oh, they're sharing all their information, they're sharing the telemetry data, they're sharing this and that. Well, what they're sharing, a lot of that is what we just talked about, where everybody was practicing at the same time. But let's say Jimmy Johnson was doing wedge adjustments, and now you know how much a wedge adjustment is going to do for your driver at this track. In the same practice time, Casey Kane was making tire pressure adjustments. And now we have information on tire pressure adjustments. So now for the same setup on these cars, we now know in a quarter of the time what 4 different adjustments are going to do for us, because everybody's been sharing that knowledge in between them too. They've been dropping their own knowledge.
That's right. That's right. Dale Jr. could be working on shocks. Jimmy Johnson could be working on splitter ride height. Casey could be working on tire pressure, and Jeff Gordon, now Chase Elliott, could be working on track bar.
Right.
And they can combine all that.
Right. And so now the crew chiefs know, well, if I adjust this, like if I adjust wedge, for example, at this track, we're just talking about a specific track that we're at, let's say we're at Charlotte, and for some reason adjusting wedge really makes the car way out of line. It makes it way out of balance, and you don't want to do that because of whatever reason. But track bar adjustment or maybe a tire pressure adjustment is going to be better for you. Right, and you only want to adjust wedge at this particular track, at this particular day, based on temperature and everything else gets going on. You only want to make that if you really need to take a big swing. So that's among the information that they know and that they can talk to each other about.
Well, the other crazy thing is they tend to practice in times of day that they would not actually race.
That's true.
Particularly when we run night races. And I think that's why, ironically, we've seen a lot of night races. Even though I love them, night races end up being quite boring because the grip level picks up so much that the teams don't have to do a lot to the car, and they're all going the same speed.
Now, why does that grip level increase so much, Sherwin?
Well, so while we're talking about tires, the temperature plays such a huge role that simple 15 to 20 degree drop in temperature that you would see in the fall, for instance, at a night race, you might see as many as 30 or 40 degree change in track temperature during the day, because not only is the ambient temperature dropping down to 70 or 80 degrees, but the UV impact from the sun on a black or a dark gray surface bolts the temperature up to 140.
Right.
Well, now we're racing and it's 75 degrees at Daytona, for instance, and maybe the car's running around out there at 5 or 10 degrees, so we're racing at 85. Well, then you got almost a 60-degree difference. Well, that has a huge impact on how much heat actually ends up in the tire, especially at a track like Daytona, where you don't get a lot of the loose, tight condition stuff. The car tends to just run around the track. You don't turn the wheel that much. You don't break the right rear loose very much. So temperature plays a huge role in preserving the tire in those circumstances. But like Atlanta, for instance, where we typically had qualifying at night, and now that it's a winter race, it's maybe 40 degrees when we qualify. And that's an entirely different level of grip than if you race during the day at what we hope will be, between 55 and 65 degrees on a rough surface. That's a dramatic difference in how the tire is going to behave.
Right. So, what else you got about tires, man? That's really
That was a lot about tires.
That was a lot about tires, and I'm nice work. I'm glad we talked about that and put it into the context of what can the crew chief do, and we're gonna have to come up with something for next week. What else can the crew chief mess with during the race? We've talked about a lot of stuff. We'll brainstorm some stuff, but we definitely, as we said when we first started talking wedge, we want to bring it up to the point where we're saying, okay, well, here's what's happening. What does a crew chief do?
Yeah, you want to try to figure out how to combine it all, and this is why I want so much to pick the brain of a NASCAR crew chief or get to sit on the box and just listen to everything they say, because I don't think we as subscribers to Race Viewer, when we're at the track listening to Scanner, we don't get to hear all the discussion, because clearly he's not keying in every time to talk to the car chief or the car engineer about what they think is going on.
Right.
Those are conversations I'd love to hear, because as an engineer, I feel like at some point with enough historical reference, I could contribute in an area like that.
Right.
Because of just pure problem-solving skills.
Right. And we already talked about the book, but The Physics of NASCAR, where a lot of this stuff that we've been talking about, we researched from there and online. But if you're interested in that stuff, go take a look at that. And like you said, try to make your own calls as a crew chief, see what happens. Next time your guy is on the mic, now we do get to hear everything that the driver says to the crew chief.
True.
Especially now, because they got rid of they had an analog and a digital channel, and they could only
we get to hear everything that
and the spotter.
The spotter says to the crew chief, and everything the driver says. For the most part, it'll blip out on occasion on the internet, but when you're at the racetrack, you're going to hear everything the driver and the spotter say.
Right.
And that's, like you said, that was thanks to the whole Clint Boyer,
right,
Michael Waltrip racing deal, which I think we've already covered enough. I don't want to. We're actually what I am. I'm excited for Clint Boyer to run the Harry Scott car.
Me too.
That's going to be fun to watch.
Me too. And see if he can get him a win. See if he can get in the chase and have some fun.
All that really cool stuff as we watch Tony ride out, hopefully on a wave of approval in his last ride.
For sure. And I think everybody's hoping he can have the success that Jeff Gordon's had, maybe the opportunity or whatever we want to call it, at the end of his career.
Well, he's a guy, he's not, I don't want to equate him to Earnhardt, because Earnhardt obviously did so much more, but if there's anybody I'm rooting other than my guy to win the Daytona 500, it's Tony, because he's won every other race there is to win at Daytona except the Daytona 500.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's a Hall of Famer without it, but,
for sure.
But I mean, it's something Tony wants.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. All right, so I think we've dropped our knowledge for today.
Dropping knowledge with the mayor. I think we only went close to 20 minutes on dropping knowledge. That was a pretty good little segment there.
Well, it's something I think it's one of the things I understand the most too. So, and I need to get to the point that I understand the others just as well, which probably means also that I've done a poor job of helping explain it. But we'll see what the fans say.
College Hall of Fame.
We've got
on the Periscope.
Oh, look at there! College Football Hall of Fame here in Atlanta, Georgia. Sherwin's got the koozie for that. I've got the official PETM Podcast koozie going on.
I am so afraid to drag mine back and forth that it's just going to stay on my desk. Because
It's a good call.
Absolutely do not want to lose it.
So speaking of college football, we'll just take a quick turn. We just found out as of this weekend that it will be Alabama-Clemson, and Sherwin's got some provenance with Clemson, some legacy there.
That's right. My dad, shout out to Donald Raymond Sherwin, old Donnie. He graduated from Clemson, and they talked me out of going there, which was probably a good thing. But yeah, I'm rooting hard for Clemson. Some people have asked me all week leading up to that game what do you think? You got a good pick? You got a good feel about it? I said, I can't give you a pick because I'm all in. I'm a fan.
Right. And being an ACC guy and being that, I know old Donald myself, so I'll jump on any sort of bandwagon I can get on if I know somebody. So between that and ACC fan, yeah, absolutely. Rooting for Clemson. If you're an Alabama fan, I'm not upset at you or anything like that. I just got to pick a side, and it's a fan podcast. Dadgummit.
Oh, for sure. And anytime we get off base in any sport that we discuss, we certainly don't want to deter any listeners or viewers on the Periscope just because you have an equal and opposite opinion about a particular sports team or entity. That's not what we're trying to do here. We just want to express our personalities as they exist, which means we are fans of particular things. I think it's probably pretty obvious if you're watching the Periscope that we're Georgia Tech fans because we're both wearing Georgia Tech shirts.
I just noticed that about a minute and a half ago.
I think it's pretty obvious we're both Casey Kane fans because we've talked about him several times. But I think we can maintain the integrity of the podcast from the independent media perspective by giving you things like the Dropping Knowledge segment.
And it's coming from, like you always say, amateur internet radio guys too. So bring your own questions and answers and follow-ups as you come up with them.
Absolutely. Make sure we got a few positive and negative feedback opportunities on the Periscope earlier. I think it's painfully obvious to me that the one person who responded in a fashion that we maybe would just find funny in a lot of ways.
It was hilarious in the context, just because there's 7 billion people on this earth. So if one person says something like that, I can totally be. They pretty much said that NASCAR fans are mentally challenged.
Right.
We'll say in the most PC way. Maybe they're a little bit less of a species than others.
Well, and one of the great things about the preface to this Driving with the Devil book was that he expressed with detail the bell curve that is the NASCAR fan, that it is well-rounded bell curve on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
It is the everyman, it is the rich man, it's the poor man, it's the hard worker.
It's the educated,
it's the blue
the
collar,
uneducated,
it's the educated. It's everybody is a fan of NASCAR within all those different slots you would put people in, and that was probably one of the things NASCAR is trying to shed. Like one of the beliefs NASCAR is trying to shed the most is that NASCAR is a dumb redneck sport, and that's
right.
All you got to do is go to a race, and you'll find out pretty quick that's not true.
And I think Jeff Gordon, throughout his entire career, was the number one catalyst for that.
Yeah, we have a lot. People don't realize how much they need to thank Jeff Gordon for what NASCAR is today. Now, some of those things aren't necessarily what you'd want them to be in terms of driving popularity in places that maybe now they don't exist anymore. I don't know. But Jeff Gordon did so much for the sport in terms of being an eloquent speaker, a fantastic sponsor representative, an extremely good race car driver,
right,
and a humble champion.
Right. Well, man, you ready to crank this down?
I guess we probably should. We've been at it for a good 45, 50 minutes.
That's right. For an off-season one, that's pretty solid.
A lot of fun doing it with the new mics here.
I know, right?
I'm digging on this.
Oh, yeah, it's beautiful. And I can just fade in the music, and we can hear it happen. You hear that? Our theme song playing.
All right. We wish everybody a happy new year. If you're a resolution type person, good luck with that. Go ahead and give me a follow at pregame EMG.
And I'm Tailgate Mayor at Tailgate Mayor. Hit us up on the G-Chat.
Hit us up on the G-Chat. We'd love to hear your emails or read your emails at PETMpodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at capital PETM lowercase podcast.
And we promise, once this season starts again, we'll actually have some real content for you.
Oh, there's going to be week-to-week content. Don't you? As soon as they have a test or something, we'll be all over that stuff.
That's right.
The duels? Oh, we're going to have a podcast on the duels.
We'll talk to y'all next week.
Thumbs up.